Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the NFL season. This is FPC Fantasy Live. My name is Kyle Senra, and I'm here on Sunday mornings once again, all season long, help people out with their start sit decisions. Also, talking about the active and active player list once that becomes available. And yes, week one, here we are, fantasy football back. We get to set lineups for today. I get to watch a bunch of NFL games, so it's a super exciting time of year. I know I'm certainly excited, happy to be here, happy to help. So, of course, for anyone who wants to interact throughout the episode, feel free to chime in the comment section. You can find us on the Full Press Coverage YouTube page. Again, comment away any questions you have to ask. I know for anyone who's watched in previous seasons, I make all my start sit decisions based on a spreadsheet that I set up. And with that, there's a lot of data that goes into that. But also, since this is week one, the spreadsheet today and for maybe the next couple weeks will be not as not as much information, we'll say. So what also means is I could quickly answer a bunch of questions because there's less to input in there. In future weeks, the one thing that might actually be an advantage to people is to message me on Twitter, DM me at Senra says in advance, and that way I can the process for start sit decisions gets more complicated and I put a lot more details in my spreadsheet. The more time I have, the better those results end up being, and that could be something where message me in advance. I'll plug those in, give you the answer, but then also explain on the show in further details. So, um, yeah, this will be NFL season's here. Of course, we're gonna have fun. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this. One little plug for one of our sponsors here, the MyBookie. Yeah, we have the MyBookie double deposit match, but yeah, MyBookie website. Use it to make a bunch of predictions bets on various sports. I mean, I'd imagine most people want to bet on the NFL, if you sign up as your initial first deposit with my bookie, use the promo code PRESS22, PRESS22, and they will double your deposit match up to 100 or up to $1,000. So if you put in 1,000, you will have $2,000 in your account to bet with on games for today and all season long, of course. So a lot of fun happening there with my bookie. And of course, the sports are fun. We love it. It's entertaining. But if you can win money off it, off the sports knowledge, that's even better. So yes, so looking at what I guess I'll start with right now is actually some of the decisions I'm making right now, some of my start sit decisions. Uh, what I'm looking at, and this week it's a lot of just the what the odds makers have said because again, there's a lot of what I do is based off of data, production from the season, defensive matchups, my goal line guide article, which I usually start writing that around week 5, even though I'm going to start digging through the data even this week and start preparing that. But usually I'll give myself 4 weeks of data and then publish the goal line guide, which can be found on fullpresscoverage.com. You can also find my weekly rankings there from this week. So that is on the website live. And about a month from now, you also have that and the goal line guide article to consult with. I'll usually utilize the goal line guide or the goal line grades as part of my process for do I start or sit players. Again, with so little information, I'm going off what the odds makers set. They're the ones with probably the most information right now. And so odds makers line team implied totals, but also over unders for the game combined total on the points. Which again, odds makers like my bookie, for instance. And what are they saying? But yeah, just various different. I think I'm using FanDuel's lines, what I had access to. Most of them are going to end up similar. There will be slight differences on some, but yes, what I'll do is I will share my spreadsheet and we'll get to that. So give me one moment here, folks. And I'll share with you at least some of the decisions that I'm trying to make right now. All right. So basically, I've got 22 fantasy leagues where I'm setting lineups, and I will focus on some there aren't really tough decisions. Who I have is fairly obvious. So just want to make sure this is being shared. Oh, it's not. Hang on. There we go. Yeah. So yeah, looking at these start sit decisions. So I suppose, is there any way to make this bigger? Nope, that's worse. Hmm. Yeah, I got to mess around with these screens. Apparently, I needed to. Oh, here we go. Yeah, you don't need to see my face at the bottom. You can see the Packers hat. That's it. They're playing today, so yeah, that appears to be. This is the best one. All right, so yes, like I mentioned, 6 leagues, and a lot of these leagues, it's not just a one-to-one decision. I've got several options I'd like to go through. So I'm going to start with usually a league I start putting in first. It's the only salary cap contract league I play, and it is my favorite format. And this league has been going since 2015. One of my oldest dynasty league, I think my second oldest league overall. So a lot of importance I place on this particular league. It is my favorite league. It's the one I care about the most. So naturally, I would start with that one. And honestly, ran into the issue of Christian Watson being out, and then also the potential that Marquise Brown might miss, and we'll address that in a sec. But yes, so if Brown does miss, I'll have to fill 2 players. But if assuming Brown does start, which seems like the reports were leading towards that he will play, I have to start one of these 5 players I selected from on my bench. So 3 Bears players, and I do have Justin Fields starting in one of the super flex spots. So it would, in theory, give me a stack. I've got Chase Claypool, I've got Darnell Mooney, and I've got Roshan Johnson. There's also Josh Palmer from the Chargers and Nico Collins from the Texans. And so some of the quick things. First off, with Roshan, I believe he is the most talented running back on the Bears right now. I think he's better than Khalil Herbert. I think he's better than Dante Foreman. But just because I believe that doesn't mean that that's what the Bears believe either. And all the reports are it looks like Roshan's either the backup or even the third stringer. They liked what they had in Khalil Herbert last year. They still have him on a rookie deal. It seems like Khalil Herbert will likely get the most touches. And once he's not carrying the football, it seems like Dante Foreman will be the second guy up. So I'm not going to play Roshan. I've got him in a couple leagues. I don't think I'm playing him anywhere week 1 to start off. I want to see what that looks like first. What does he look like when he's on the Bears? Second, so that was a quick kind of okay. We'll leave him on the bench for now. And then I was looking at the Bears and looking at Darnell Mooney and Chase Claypool, and specifically the matchups against the Packers. Because here's where I talked about this on the Full Press Packers pod this week. My co-host Jesse and I, we were joined by Carlos Nazario, who is the Full Press Bears managing editor. And how are the Packers going to approach coverages, specifically secondary coverages on the Bears receivers? There's really like 2 options in my mind. It's either Jair Alexander shadows DJ Moore, in which case, you might have that would maybe, I think, in theory, give a better edge to Claypool. Because what that'll do is Jair will only ever go into the slot if DJ Moore is covering the slot, which is good for Mooney because he probably won't have to see Jair Alexander ever. But if Moore is primarily going to play on the outside and Jair stays out there, that leaves Rasul Douglas as the main slot corner. Now, with Eric Stokes out, maybe they want Douglas on the perimeter, but it seems like when Stokes, Alexander, and Douglas are all healthy, all 3 corners, Douglas will be the one that primarily plays nickel corner, which it does give a tough matchup to Mooney. Now, with Stokes out, it might be Carrington Valentine who's playing the other outside corner spot, which would then leave Claypool against him. So that makes an edge for Claypool. It's the weakest of the 3 corners. However, what if they don't want Valentine out there? What if they want Keyshawn Nixon as the secondary guy, as the nickel corner, and then Douglas to the outside because Stokes is out? Now, ideally, they'd like Douglas in as slot corner as much as possible, but with Stokes out, maybe they put him on the perimeter, covering Claypool, which leaves Mooney against Keyshawn Nixon, and that leaves him as the best option. And then again, that's assuming Alexander shadow covers. If they really do just stick to their sides, then it really does come down to, do they want Nixon on the field more or do they want Valentine on the field? And that's the matchup to kind of exploit for the Bears. So it's tough to know between Mooney and Claypool who's going to get the better coverage on the majority of plays. So then what I really went back to is, okay, forget coverages. What have those players done against the Packers? Claypool's played the Packers once, and this on a piece of paper somewhere. Oh yes, here it is. So yeah, Claypool has just the one game against the Packers last season. So when he was on the Bears, 5 catches for 28 yards. So I like the volume of 5 catches, but to get 28 yards out of 5 receptions is pretty bad. Whereas Mooney has put up some very impressive games against the Packers. I noticed one where he had like 13 targets, 11 catches. I don't think he hit 100 yards on 11 catches, which is kind of crazy. So the yards efficiency isn't great for either. Um, I believe Mooney has, I think, just the one touchdown in his career against the Packers, and it wasn't even that heavily targeted 13 target game. But all to say, he's put up better performances, and like last year, he was brutal. Last year, he didn't play the second game against the Packers. He played the first game, had 1 catch for -4 yards, but that was also with Pettis and Equinemius St. Brown as the outside receivers. So coverage was drawn towards Mooney as the clearly the best receiver in that group. That's not going to be the case. And I look back to those big performances Mooney had. It was when Allen Robinson was on the team. So I think DJ Moore draws enough away to help Mooney with those coverages. So I would prefer Mooney over Claypool just because we haven't seen Claypool do it against this team before. We have seen Mooney in similar situations been able to produce well. So that kind of, okay, if I'm going to stack with Fields, I'm going to go with Darnell Mooney, which makes sense. It's a salary cap contract league too, so there's some extra context clues. Mooney's contract is bigger than Claypool's. I actually traded a draft, I think a first rounder, which wasn't good. I think I was going to take Sky Moore anyway with that first round pick, so maybe it's maybe I kind of dodged a bullet in a sense. But I've invested in Mooney, and part of me wants to play him because I've invested. But that shouldn't be the fallacy of, oh, you've invested in you just because you invested you have to start him. I feel like NFL teams get into that problem a lot, but all to say, the reasons I would start Mooney over Claypool have nothing to do with the contract or the situation or what I gave up, just how they've produced against the Packers. So Mooney, I think, is an option, and the option I would want to stack with. If I'm going to stack Fields with someone, it would be him at this point. I mean, I don't have DJ Moore on this team. That'd be the ideal one. Now, between Josh Palmer and Nico Collins, I've kind of taken Collins out, and part of 2 reasons. One is the time frame. Palmer and Mooney both play in the 4 o'clock Eastern slate, so I can let the 1 o'clock games play out and then decide from there. I can make that decision after. With Nico Collins, he plays at 1. So if I were to start him, I'm stuck with that without knowing what those 1 o'clock game results are going to be. The other reason, and this is maybe even more so why I am thinking of, I put Collins, as you can see, in orange to say I've decided to not play them. I don't love Collins playing a tough opponent. I mean, they've got they're the biggest underdogs this week. I think they're a 10-point or 9.5-point underdogs. So the second lowest implied total, which the 16.75, I think the only team with a lower implied total is the Cardinals with Josh Dobbs at quarterback. But all to say, CJ Stroud, I like him as a quarterback, but it's going to be his first NFL start. There's a lot of risk there. And it's funny because on website predictions have Collins with the highest projection out of Mooney or Palmer, or really any of these 5. And I've asked people the question, Mooney, Palmer, Collins, and a lot of people have answered Collins. I'm in the Dynasty Trades HQ group chat. And the couple of responses I got, people think Collins. I wonder the chance of potentially being the number 1 receiver on the team. I don't think that's going to be the case with Mooney, with DJ Moore. Certainly don't think that's Josh Palmer. The only interesting thing with Josh Palmer is the implied total and the over-under. The Chargers, 26.5, have the 3rd highest implied total of any team this week. And I think, honestly, with Mark Andrews being hurt, this 26.75 for the Ravens, I think, has actually gone down. So there's a chance that at this point, the Chargers have the 2nd highest implied total of the week. And the highest was the Chiefs. So that's already played. So right now, the odds makers are saying there's a really good chance that the Chargers score the most points out of any team today. And even if Palmer doesn't get nearly as many targets as Keenan Allen or Mike Williams, I still think there's enough of a chance where he might be worth it. So I was looking at some of Josh Palmer numbers. Like, what can we expect from Josh Palmer when Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are playing? So I looked, and he has played 18 games in his career where both Keenan Allen and Mike Williams suited up. and started the game. Maybe didn't finish, but at least started the game. In those 18 games, he has a total of 41 catches for 406 yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. So if you average that out, he's basically averaging 2.3 catches a game, 22.6 receiving yards a game, and 0.11 touchdowns per game, which basically gives him an average of 4.07. This is a half PPR scoring, as I can see I've indicated the scoring settings. Um, so 4.07 fantasy points is an average kind of production. I actually went and looked at Nico Collins. What has he done over his career? Um, and his average is 2.9 catches, 38.6 yards, 0.13 touchdowns per game, which is a little bit higher than the 0.11 from Palmer, but almost identical essentially. So really, just the difference is Collins has been better at getting yards, slightly more catches per game too, and his average is 6.09. Now, if I take Darnell Mooney, I took all 5 games he played against the Packers, and his average, even including last year's 1 catch for -4 yards game, his average fantasy points per game against the Packers has been 7.04 in this scoring setting. So Mooney has the best average. He also, if I look at their best games, I compiled like in those situations. Like for Collins, I literally just looked at his whole career, but for Palmer, what's his best game with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams? Darnell Mooney, what's his best game against the Packers? All decent, but their best fantasy output was for Palmer, 5 catches, 53 yards and a touchdown, so 12.5 fantasy points. For Nico Collins, 6 catches, 82 yards and a touchdown for 13.4 fantasy points. For Mooney, it was, I think it was 11 catches. So I guess, yeah, he's had 2 really good games. The non-touchdown game actually was his best because he had 11 receptions. Ended up with 14.8 fantasy points. I think it was something like 98 yards or something. No touchdown in that game, but even without a touchdown, his best performance against the Packers trumps Collins' best performance in his career and Josh Palmer's best performance with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen in the lineup. So all to say, at this point, I am leaning Mooney, going for the stack with Justin Fields. And I think at this point, I've decided I'm going to bench Collins. So it really does come down to that matchup that Josh Palmer has against the Dolphins. Are the Chargers going to score so many points that even the third or potentially fourth wide receiver produces well? Potentially. If there's any game that's going to do it today, it seems like it's that one. I just have a feeling that Mooney, now that the coverage isn't going to be, he's not going to be the main focus of coverage. I do believe that's going to be DJ Moore. And if the Packers really should, because if they don't put an emphasis on DJ Moore, he's probably going to burn them. So I would imagine the Packers are smart enough to realize that's the guy they have to stop. But because of that, Mooney might get a lot of production. Half PPR, I maybe like it less than I would in full PPR. Because again, Mooney, a lot of underneath stuff. It's not the yards, it's not maybe big touchdown numbers. It's just really the volume. You prefer that in full PPR relative to half PPR. But I think there'll be enough production there that he's the guy I'm leaning right now. But potentially I go with Josh Palmer. Now looking at some other decisions, another one including Nico Collins, and this is one where I haven't actually put anything yet. Notice I haven't automatically benched any of these guys or started. It's a PPR start one. I believe it's start 11 total. It's a bit of a tight end premium as well. But none of the tight ends I would have that I could flex are really good enough. I've got Dalton Schultz. He's starting, and then there's some depth tight ends. Maybe I need to clean up the back end of that roster. Actually, I'm kind of waiting to see who gets targets week one, and the guys that don't, I'll be willing to drop them for other positions. All to say, Nico Collins, Josh Downs, Hunter Renfrow as 3 receivers, but I also have Evan Hull. And the Zach Moss news listed as doubtful yesterday, so it doesn't look like Zach Moss is going to play. I think the active and inactive list is probably out now, so we'll consult that. But if it really is just Deion Jackson and Evan Hull lining up, that's probably where I'm going to go. I'm going to go Hull in this league. Actually, my next league, the Dynasty Trades HQ 2 listener league, so a couple of Shane Manila leagues there, actually. I've got Deion Jackson in that as well. And yeah, one of the things I'm waiting for is that official designation with Zach Moss is out, which means I'm probably picking both of them. Hull in the one league, Deion Jackson in the other league. I've got a lot of shares of both. I think I've maybe got 1 or 2 other leagues where Deion's already starting. But this would be, I think, the only league where I would start Evan Hull. So assuming Zach Moss is out, that's probably the decision I'm going to make there. I've kind of just set it out and made other decisions. So maybe let's focus on that. The Dynasty Junkies 3 listener league. There were really, there's a few receivers I have that are kind of automatic starts. I can't think of right now, but But regardless, the back end and flex guys are where I was thinking about. So there was three potential like one of them is like Chris Godwin. Like I'm automatically playing Godwin. I'm not even going to consider it. He should get tons of volume. The Vikings defense is awful. And I'm a Packers fan saying that, so take that with a grain of salt. But their defense really wasn't good last year. So one of the things that I would like to do is I think just for sure play Chris Godwin. But anyway, Zay Flowers, Juju Smith Schuster, Elijah Moore, Tyler Boyd. I can play three of those four. It's a tight end premium league, PPR, but again, none of like Ty Conklin, I think, is my best backup tight end. So I'm not really going to flex them over these players. So the thinking is, and honestly, at this point, I think Zay Flowers in this league, especially, is kind of becoming an automatic start because it looks like Mark Andrews won't play. So it's just more volume for everyone. Maybe the rookie in his first start, as we saw Marquise Brown in his first start as a rookie playing against the Dolphins, 150 yards, 2 touchdowns in his first ever NFL game. Lamar has that capacity to just make those great performances. I don't know, especially with Andrews out, unless Beckham is back to being old BJ of old, there's no one on the Ravens team right now that should get in Zay Flowers' way of doing something like Marquise Brown did. So the more time has passed since I initially made the spreadsheet, I would almost not even put Zay Flowers on. Like he would be like Chris Godwin in the locked in. So he was the first of these three that I think I definitely wanted to play. Then it really just did come down to bench one of Juju Smith-Schuster, Elijah Moore, Tyler Boyd. Looking at the numbers, now Boyd and Moore playing the same game, so their over/under at 47.5 is the same because it's in the same game. Eagles, Patriots, their over/under was set at 45. When anyway, I think updated this maybe yesterday or Friday. But all to say, of those three, the highest implied total is Tyler Boyd, 24.5. Certainly the best quarterback, I think, as good as I think Deshaun Watson will be bound to. I still think Joe Burrow's better. And Juju has Mac Jones. So it's definitely not him. So it kind of made Boyd the next guy to kind of decide on, yes, let me in. Like Zay Flowers, I'm investing in the good quarterbacks. And to that point, I decided to go Elijah Moore over Juju, even though I think my rankings doesn't match that. I believe I have Juju ranked higher than Elijah Moore. Now that is for half PPR, not full PPR. Although you'd imagine Juju gets the boost with full PPR because it'll probably be so much volume based, like Jacoby Myers was with the Patriots. Part of this is something I will do too. If I've got a player in only one league, I might just throw them in just to make sure I have exposure to them. And this is really maybe more than anything why I'm taking Elijah Moore over Juju. I've got Juju in quite a few different leagues, I think 5 of my 22. This is the only league where I have Elijah Moore. So part of that motivates it too, where if I don't play Juju here and he goes off, I've still got him starting in a couple other spots to where I'll take advantage of it. But if I bench Moore and he goes off, I don't get any exposure to it. So it's maybe the FOMO, right? The fear of missing out on Elijah Moore that's making me want to play him. But again, looking at this implied total and this over under, not only should the Browns expected to score more points than the Patriots, but that game in total, that Browns Bengals game, is expected to have more points overall than the Eagles Patriots. So those numbers again rely on the odds makers this week because it really is the best info we have right now. Again, these odds makers, there's a reason they usually win. They're some of the best people in the world at picking and predicting work for these odds makers. So they kind of know what they're doing. And not to say they're always right, but don't reinvent the wheel. They've given us this information for a reason. Going on to Tyler Boyd versus Jacoby Myers in another league. This is a co-managed league, and actually, I know my co-manager initially wanted Myers in the lineup, and I think he was looking at some rankings, and Myers was ranked higher than Tyler Boyd in weekly rankings. Doesn't match my weekly rankings, which I told him. I don't think I sent him a link to my rankings, but I basically just told him, as much as like I think it was 4 for 4, and I do respect 4 for 4. A lot of great writers there. Jen Eakins is there. They've got some good people, but just because 4 for 4 says Myers ahead of Boyd, I don't buy it. The problem I have with Jacoby Myers, and this is the only league I have Myers in. This is the Dynasty League. It was a startup last year, and I loved his role with the Patriots. I don't know what his role with the Raiders is going to be, and I've noticed in draft like this off season in drafts, whether it's Dynasty or redraft, people are pricing Myers as if he's the clear number 2. And that's why I also considered starting Renfro. A lot of people wouldn't because they clearly view Myers ahead of Renfro. I know I do touchdown projections. And not to say that my touchdown projections just mean total production for everyone, but I had projected Renfro at 5 touchdowns. I think Myers only 3, like almost doubling him up. And that I guess I'm hesitant to just assume Jacoby Myers, this undrafted free agent who has produced well beyond an undrafted free agent has, drawing volume with the Patriots all those years as the clear best receiver on the Patriots. That's one thing. He's now playing with Devontae Adams. And can Jacoby Myers really be productive on such little volume? We've seen Tyler Boyd put up big weeks even as the number 3 receiver. Again, back to implied total. The Bengals are expected to score more than the Raiders. The over under. The Bengals Browns game expected to be higher than the Raiders Broncos. The other thing too is that Broncos secondary is really good. And I went back and I looked at I think both Jacoby Myers and Hunter Renfro. Or I guess not Myers. I went and looked back at Hunter Renfro and his career against the Broncos. I think he had one good game, and it was like a 100-yard game and a touchdown. And I think the next 5 or 6 contests against the Broncos, Renfro has less than 40 yards in every single game. So if we expect Myers to play a similar role to Renfro did last year as the main slot receiver on the Raiders, that hasn't been very productive against the Broncos in years past. So I'm really hesitant to play Myers, and I think I explained that to my co-manager. I thought I did a good enough job because he kind of conceded and said to go with Boyd. Maybe I'm wrong. And it's funny because this is an example where this is the only league I have Myers in. So if I want to get some exposure, I'll do it. But unlike Elijah Moore, I just have so little faith, not even in the quarterback, because I think Jimmy G is good. I don't think he's as good as Deshaun Watson, for instance. But that secondary is really tough. The Broncos might have the best secondary in the NFL, certainly among the best. So I'm hesitant to play Myers. I want to see that he is clearly earning targets ahead of Renfro before I start to put him in a lineup. So that one was pretty easier for me to go with Boyd. It was really more about convincing my co-manager was the not difficult part because I explained my process, my reasoning, and I think he bought into the logic as much as and consult other people. But it did seem like his main reasoning was just looking at someone else's rankings and saying, "Oh, Myers is ahead of Boyd." But why? Why do they rank Myers ahead of Boyd? And is it assumption that again, I'm not just assuming Myers is coming in because Renfro's been really great, and if targets are earned, he earned those targets for a reason. I don't think Myers just comes in and takes all that away from Renfro. There might be weeks where Myers gets more targets than Renfro. There might be other weeks where it flips. And I think that might even be the likelier scenario. There is a chance that Myers just completely erases Renfro, but I think that is such a minimal chance of happening. Like that's like a 1% chance to where Renfro just disappears and Myers is the clear number 2. So I want to wait and see and we might not because the Broncos secondary is so good. We might not get a good read on it this week. So I'm really hesitant on Myers. The last one I want to talk about, speaking of the Broncos, Cortland Sutton, Brandon Cooks, Jahan Dotson, Jamal Williams. Half PPR, half point per first down as well in this league. And the truth is, back to like the timing of the game is being so important. I'm kind of leaning towards deciding between Brandon Cooks and Cortland Sutton because I get more information. Jerry Jeudy, questionable. If he plays, as much as it is a really good matchup against the Raiders. So even if Jeudy plays, Cortland Sutton could still go off. But certainly if Jerry Judy's out, I think Cortland Sutton, the only player who could possibly prevent him from leading the team in targets is Greg Dulcich. And there have been a lot of like negative reports about Dulcich in that he's not going to be like the clear tight end one of the team. It's going to be tight end by committee almost, and all of them will struggle to get targets. If that's the case, Cortland Sutton's the clear alpha in the passing game without Jerry Jeudy. So I kind of want to wait to find out if Jeudy, because that is a 4 p.m. Eastern start. So we're not going to know about Jerry Judy's status officially until 3:30, quarter after 3 Eastern today. So that's kind of why I'm leaving Jahan Dotson and Jamal Williams on the bench. I will get that decision later. And if for some reason I don't want to play Sutton, I've got Brandon Cooks playing at the night game tonight. So sometimes the timing of these players can influence the decision. And this is, I think, is a great example of that. I would love to play Dotson, but now that McLaurin is back and active and playing, maybe I'm a little less excited because I think initially when I set this lineup up Tuesday and there was talk that McLaurin might not play, I think Dotson was the easier choice. But now with McLaurin in, Dotson suddenly not being the alpha in that passing game, and we'll see. Jamal Williams should get an uptick in volume, but this is the reverse Elijah Moore example. I've got Jamal Williams starting. I think I've got him in 8 different leagues, and I think I'm starting him in 6 of those 8. And this will be one of the 2 where I'm not starting him. So I might, if I miss out on this one and he goes off, I'll have him in so many other places that I won't feel like I'm losing out. Not to say that I only have Sutton and Cooks in these leagues, but just the appeal of Sutton as the main alpha against this really weak Raiders secondary is, if Judy's out, I think he's the easy decision. But again, I can't play Dotson and Williams now and still have that decision open. So I have to bench those two in order to be able to like maximize that decision. Wait for Jerry Judy's official announcement. And if that's out, then yeah, I want Sutton. He's the guy I want in this lineup anyway. So yeah, that's kind of how I go through my weekly process for my spreadsheet and making these start sit decisions. Threw in some numbers there. I think as this season goes on, we could use numbers just from this season a lot more effectively. But we don't have anything from this year yet, so that's why I went back and looked at previous games, especially for like Darnell Mooney and like previous games where he played against the Packers or Josh Palmer. Well, if Mike Williams and Keenan Allen are active today, like what can we possibly expect from an outcome for Palmer, even in the best of matchups? And so, like, I felt that helped me in that particular decision give me more confidence to play Darnell Mooney based on what we've seen before, what he's the ceiling performances he's put up against the Packers being higher than anything Josh Palmer has done with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams on the team. So that's one thing there. Don't have any comments right now, no questions. And so what I will do is I'll check Twitter real quick to see if someone has DM'd me or tagged me, and that's how they want their questions answered. And I'll go through that. But it looks like there's nothing there in terms of questions for anyone has. And of course, I'll be on for a little bit longer. So if anyone does have any questions, feel free to throughout the stream ask away. But yeah, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull up the active inactive list. So let me go see. Yeah, always the first one of the year is always difficult. Where did I go? Do I go Roto something? There's too many Rotos. They've all rotated my mind. Active and active week 1, 2023. Let's see what we got here. RotoWire. I feel like it's RotoWire that I usually use. Yeah, the inactive list. So I love RotoWire for this because they, and maybe they won't list the active players; they'll just list the inactive players. So you have to kind of, if a player's, a player might not play and not be listed on this list because they're put on injured reserve, like a Cooper Cup. I don't think Cooper Cup will be listed on, and I mean, this is, they'll be playing later anyway, so the Rams aren't on this list now, but like a guy like Cooper Cup wouldn't be listed on the inactive list because he's not on the active roster at all. A lot of these are players because, 53-man active roster, but I think you're only allowed 46 active players on game day. So you have to have at least 7 healthy scratches. Now, if players are injured, they're not healthy scratches. They're just out with an injury, but not put on the injured reserve. And those will make your decisions there. Some teams have placed players on injured reserve and haven't signed another player back up. So they won't have 7 players on this list because their active roster list currently isn't 53. It's a little less. So yeah, I'm just going to go through and go team by team and see what fantasy relevant players are there. Looking at the Cardinals. So yeah, Elijah Higgins at tight end, and this is interesting because he was a Dolphins draft pick at wide receiver, and they converted him to tight end. But he ultimately didn't end up making the team. Signed on with the Cardinals, but they aren't going to make him active yet. I think Zach Ertz is playing, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think he's starting the year on PUP or injured reserve, so that's probably behind motivating factor behind that. I don't love playing either Ertz or McBride week 1 just because there's so much up in the air. And especially this one name, Kevin Beacham at offensive tackle. I believe he's one of the starting offensive linemen for the Cardinals. So they're already, and I mean, I don't think Chase Young is playing for Washington. I'll go down and look. Yeah, Chase Young is out. So it's not like the Washington defense will be at full force either. But I think for the Cardinals offense, you can't really afford anyone being hurt. Now, we'll say Marquise Brown is playing, and that's a big one. I know I had a lot of options in terms of who to play for him kind of set up. And honestly, I've got Marquise Brown, I think 6 or 7 leagues. I think there's only one league where I'm not going to play him in. And part of that is I wanted to get Beckham in the lineup just because of the lack of Mark Andrews being out. Or yeah, I think, and that is official. Mark Andrews is out, by the way, as we get to that team in a sec. But yeah, I think for the most part, I'm going to just play Marquise Brown, James Conner in a couple spots. Those are really the only two Cardinals players I really want to play this week. Brown everywhere just because of the volume. I think he'll still do well, even on a poor team, because that's all he's done is in his career. Every time he steps on the field, he earns targets. So I don't see how this year, especially with such a poor receiving core, how that's any different this year. Yeah, the overall efficiency is going to be the worst he's seen in his career, but he might just make up for that in volume entirely. Atlanta Falcons. Wide receiver Josh Ali and tight end John Fitzpatrick are inactive. I pride myself on knowing quite a lot about teams. I don't know who either of those two players are, so those don't really matter too much. Um, the one guy that might, I don't know if anyone was going to play him now that Bijan Robinson's on the team, but Cordarrelle Patterson is inactive for this week. So, I mean, I don't think I necessarily want to play Tyler Algier. Obviously, Bijan is locked in lineups. What that might mean is just more targets for the receivers and the tight ends. But yeah, Cordarrelle Patterson inactive, kind of an interesting one. To get to the Ravens, I mentioned that Mark Andrews is inactive. The backup quarterback Tyler Huntley is also inactive apparently, and a couple of corners, most notably Marlon Humphrey for the Ravens, also Jeff Okudah for the Falcons, which is funny because both those teams are playing rookie quarterbacks in their first starts. And for the Ravens, it's C.J. Stroud, no Marlon Humphrey. Maybe that helps. I don't think I'm gonna go Nico Collins over Darnell Mooney, but in theory, that might help. Now, Collins may not have been in the slot anyway. I don't know how to approach the Texans receiving room at all. So maybe just wait and see. Even with Marlon Humphrey out, I still think that defense has enough talent. It's good enough that the odds makers have the Texans as the second lowest implied total of the week, and I believe the Cardinals are the third. Now, something that might help the Cardinals, something that was potentially going to hurt them, was the potential that their top two receivers, their top two veteran receivers, were going to be out. DJ Chark has been ruled out, but Adam Thielen, who is questionable, will play. So Adam Thielen's in the lineup. I think I've got him in one maybe two leagues, and I'm going to start him. Even though it's the Falcons. Sorry, it's not a great defense, but it's more just the concern of rookie quarterbacks in their first starts. If I can avoid those situations, I will. So I think of the two leagues where I have Thielen, I believe I'm benching him in one spot, but going to start him in another where I don't think we've got the options. It's a shallow bench. It's a co-managed team. We drafted Alvin Kamara too, so kind of using up those first 3 weeks, almost wasting a bench spot. Not that it feels like it's wasted. Once Kamara's back, he'll smash, but just made it so that running with Thielen, no choice. Excuse me. Yeah, this is choking me up because I'm a big Chase Brown fan. He's Canadian. My Canadian bias showing there. The Bengals actually made him inactive, and I thought there was a good chance he might be the number 2 running back for the Bengals. And that could still happen late, but for right now, it looks like Travion Williams, Chris Evans are still the main backups to Joe Mixon. So that's interesting. Not that I think I would play either of them. Joe Mixon certainly playable. Looking at the Browns, Juwan Thornhill at safety. He's the only noteworthy inactive. And that to me, I wonder if, especially because I believe he plays more strong safety, maybe it's easier to run against the Browns. So I think Joe Mixon was kind of in the must-start territory anyway, just because of the offense. But that's an interesting look. Maybe those couple leagues where I'm deciding about Tyler Boyd, it just gives me more confidence in that. Houston Texans. So a couple of inactives on the. So this is interesting because they have 3 quarterbacks: C.J. Stroud, Case Keenum, and Davis Mills, and they made Case Keenum inactive. So that's telling me Keenum's the third guy, clearly. So as bad as Davis Mills has been, they still trust him more than Case Keenum. So I don't know. If anyone's holding Case Keenum, you're probably safe to drop him even in deeper super flex leagues. John Mechie, the second-year receiver who didn't play at all last year, cancer diagnosis, also recovering from a torn ACL. It seems like, I don't know if it's either of those two things or a different injury has held him out, but he has been ruled out. So he's not playing. And then Dare Ogunbowale at running back looks like he's the 4th guy. It's going to be Dameon Pierce, Devin Singletary, and it looks like Mike Boone is the 3rd running back, and Dare as the 4th guy. It was interesting because there's a couple of leagues where I could, in theory, go out and try and pick up a Mike Boone or an Ogunbowale. This kind of tells me Boone's the guy you'd rather have. Indianapolis Colts. Zach Moss is officially ruled out. Also, the rookie tight end, Will Mallory. Although I don't know if no one should have been relying on him to start, so that shouldn't affect anyone. But yeah, Zach Moss is out, so that tells me those leagues where I was considering playing Evan Hull or Deion Jackson, I'm totally going all in. I know I've seen some leagues where people are trying to sell off on them. Someone, Scott Connor, shout out to him. He's a great dynasty mine at Charles Chill FB on Twitter. I'm a couple leagues with him, and I suppose he spam offered this not just to me, but to everyone in the league. But Deion Jackson for a third in both leagues. So I'd imagine a lot of people have those. Go check those inbox offers. One of those was one of the leagues where I'm starting Evan Hull. I think I showed that in my spreadsheet, the Dynasty Trades in 5 league. And my thinking was, why am I going to spend a third on Deion Jackson when I spent a fourth or probably a late third on Evan Hull already? He's already on my lineup and I feel confident starting him. Why would I go for Deion Jackson? I've got Deion Jackson is my most rostered dynasty running back. One of my most rostered dynasty players overall, actually, tied with Nathan Rourke. Go Canadian again. And speaking of Nathan Rourke, the Jaguars, Rourke isn't inactive, but he's also on the practice squad. So he might not be listed on this active list. They might make him active, though, just because he's the third quarterback in the new NFL rules. The third quarterback is on an emergency basis only. You can only play him if your first 2 starters got hurt, but they won't count against your 46 active players on the roster. So I think Rourke will be there as the emergency third stringer, but technically not active as part of the 46. But looking at the Jaguars, the rookie Parker Washington is inactive. I've got him in a couple dynasty leagues, but it's stashes long term. I wasn't planning to start him at any point. All the receivers are healthy right now. But interesting that Jermichael Hasty at running back is inactive. And it seemed like Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby were the top 2. It's funny, it's similar to the Texans. But then for the Texans, it was Mike Boone, Dario Ogunbowale, who's going to be the third. For the Jaguars, it looks like Dearness Johnson is the guy they prefer as the third running back over Hasty. So interesting how that goes. I actually thought it would be the opposite, but I've always been higher on Hasty than everyone. So it's including the Jags, apparently. So that's maybe no surprise there. For the Vikings, David Kissenberry as an offensive tackle is out. That's maybe I don't think that would make me not want to play like a Jordan Addison. Certainly Jefferson's in lineups, but TJ Hawkinson might still be the number 1 tight end. This one offensive lineman isn't going to stop that. Marcus Davenport is a linebacker. Maybe that helps the Buccaneers offense more than anything. But yeah. This is an interesting situation with the Saints because Kendre Miller has been ruled out. And with Kamara on suspension, and I believe they put Eno Benjamin on the IR for the year, I have no idea who the Saints' backup running back is. So that tells me Jamal Williams is probably going to get a ton of work. Like I mentioned earlier, I've got him in 8 leagues. I'm going to start him in, I think, 6 of the 8. Maybe it should be 8 of 8. But yeah, the Titans' defense is pretty good, though. Their secondary and their pass defense seems like it's a lot worse than the run defense. So while it looks like Williams is going to get massive volume, I'm not expecting this like RB1 week from him. So just temper expectations. You drafted him late. Like these are the weeks you're starting him, is those 3 weeks without Kamara on suspension. So start him anyway, but just know that it's maybe not the biggest ceiling performance. Pittsburgh Steelers, Gunnar Olszewski is the only offensive player of note that's inactive. San Francisco 49ers. Tyrion Davis-Price at running back is inactive. And I know Elijah Mitchell was questionable. I think even Jordan Mason were questionable. They're both going to play. It looks like the hierarchy is Christian McCaffrey is the clear RB1 on the team, but also in fantasy. Like I had him ranked as RB1. I'd imagine like in my year-long rankings, but also like even my weekly rankings, even considering the Steelers defense, I do wonder, especially early in the year, does Brock Purdy rely on his dump off options a lot, especially against such a good pass rush? So that could mean a good week for Debo. I like Debo more than I like Ayuk this week for that reason. I'm a little concerned with Ayuk. I think I've only got him in 1 league and I'm going to play him, but I'm tempering my expectations. And I know I put Debo ahead of Ayuk in my weekly rankings. This could be a high volume game for Christian McCaffrey. But all to say, it looks like Elijah Mitchell is the clear backup, and then it also looks like Jordan Mason is the clear number 3 behind Tyrion Davis-Price, or ahead of Tyrion Davis-Price. So that's interesting there. For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, inactive is Keyshawn Vaughn at running back. So that tells me the top 3 is Rashad White, and there's been reports of late that Sean Tucker not only leapfrogged Keyshawn Vaughn, which frankly isn't difficult to do at all, but he's also gone ahead of Chase Edmonds. And like I've maybe been critical of Chase Edmonds in the past. I felt certain years he just got way overdrafted, but he's a good running back. He's been capable of producing in the league, especially as a pass catching back. and it looks like Sean Tucker has gone ahead of him. So that's fairly impressive enough. Looks like Rashad White is still the main guy to have. I think I saw one of my opponents in one of my leagues is starting Sean Tucker against me, and that excited me because it's like, wow, I don't expect much from him, but who knows? Maybe with against the Vikings poor defense, Packers fan again speaking, that Swiss cheese Vikings defense, I'll call it. Maybe he does well, but yeah, I wouldn't recommend starting Sean Tucker. I still think Rashad White gets the majority of the work. But yeah, at least Chase Edmonds is ahead of Keyshawn Vaughn. I know I've got him in quite a few leagues, but yeah, it doesn't look like he's going to be very playable too often this year. Payne Durham at tight end is inactive, and I didn't necessarily expect much from him, but it also shows again the hierarchy. Kate Otten, the clear tight end one, starting on the team. Cole Kieft, another rookie from last year. Both were rookies, both now second year players. It looks like he's the main backup ahead of Pine Durham. So yeah, I don't know that I'd start either. Even Kate Otten, like I think you can probably go other tight ends before you get to Kate Otten. Tennessee Titans. So Will Levis is inactive. That's interesting because that means Malik Willis is the main backup at least to start the year over Will Levis. I was wondering how that was going to work. I almost did initially think Levis was probably going to be ahead of Willis, and Willis was just dead awful last year. What does that say about Will Levis if like he can't even get ahead of Malik Willis, who is maybe the worst quarterback who played games last year? Wait, did Trace McSorley play? Yeah, I guess Trace McSorley played. Never mind. The second worst quarterback who played NFL games last year was probably Malik Willis, and Will Levis can't even get ahead of him on the depth chart. So I know I was kind of fading Will Levis all throughout the draft process, and then certainly when he got second round capital instead of first capital, I was off him completely because people were still taking him in the back end of the first in Dynasty Superflex leagues. Yeah, I've got no interest in Will Levis, no shares, no cares. I didn't draft him anywhere, so I don't care that he's he's buried on this team. Colton Dowell's inactive. I have no idea who that is, but yeah, the wide receivers are all healthy, the main guys. But really, you just want two, I'd imagine, DeAndre Hopkins and Traylon Burks. I don't really want to start or even roster Nick Westbrook-Akine, but he would be the third guy. Back to the Commanders. I mentioned earlier Chase Young is out. Really, that's the most significant player on this team that's out. So does that help the Cardinals' offense at all? Potentially. But yeah, I guess that is the active inactive list. And honestly, yeah, it's 12:20, so not quite on for an hour yet, but 50 minutes done pretty solid. There weren't any questions. I'll go back again and check Twitter just to make sure no one has DM me asking for questions. But yeah, I guess I can just recap some of the decisions I had. Well, I guess. Oh no, actually, that's true. Maybe I will spend 10 minutes on this, so we might get to the full hour. But what do we do with the later inactives and some ideas maybe for some of those players? So a couple of them, I guess, as a Packers fan, maybe we start with Green Bay then. Romeo Dubs still questionable for later, and I think this could be something where honestly, the next player I'll mention, Ramondre Stevenson. It's funny because the league where I've got Ramondre Stevenson in one league, and I went and I picked up Jaden Reed off the waiver wire actually to play as the replacement for Stevenson because it's a later start. It does seem like Stevenson's going to play, however, so I probably won't need to start Jaden Reed there. But for anyone who has Romeo Dubs and Jaden Reed's available, that's probably more likely to be a redraft league than a dynasty league. But he's a guy that I would consider playing because I've got Dubs in a dynasty league though. Reed wasn't available, and honestly, waiver wires don't have much. But looking at on my own roster, Paris Campbell, and this will maybe lead into the next player I'll talk about. But well, like I'll just say right now, Darren Waller's questionable. Now again, kind of like Ramondre Stevenson, it's expected he'll play, but if like he's the clear alpha, well, not clear because we don't know yet, but from all the reports for the Giants, it looks like Waller's going to lead this team in targets. Like he's the guy that Jones is focusing on the most. He is what appears to be the alpha of this passing offense. But if Waller's out, that opens everything up for everybody else. Who knows who's the number one wide receiver on the team? Maybe it's Paris Campbell. Maybe it's Isaiah Hodges. Maybe it's Darius Slayton. Maybe it's the rookie Jalen Hyatt. Maybe Sterling Shepard has miraculously recovered from back-to-back seasons of an Achilles tear and an ACL tear. I think it's opposite, which is what really makes it hesitant because he's coming off the Achilles rupture, and that seems like that's the even worse one to get back to. But if he does, if Sterling Shepard somehow returns from the grave, maybe he's the number one receiver. So there's options everywhere. All of those guys could be available to pick up. I'm just knowing that in the league where I've got Romeo Dubs, if If he doesn't play, it's probably Paris Campbell. But I'm also looking at that's my start sit decisions. I've got Deion Jackson anyway, so that might not even get to that. Like if yeah, well, was yeah with Zach Moss out, I think I'm just gonna play Deion Jackson and not even let that bother. But if anyone is dealing with the questionable call on Romeo Dubs, no Christian Watson means Dubs is a really intriguing option. If he does play, I'd expect he's first or second on the team in targets, and the two guys he's really competing with. Well, one of them's Aaron Jones, who might still be the leading target for this game, but uh, the other guys he's competing with are rookies. Jaden Reed, the rookie tight end Luke Musgrave. So I do like Dub's chances to play, but if he doesn't, there are options. Again, I'm looking at that Giants game Sunday night as potential to have a few guys of exposure to play. If you have Darren Waller, and in one league where I've got Waller, I actually happen to have Daniel Bellinger. It's a dynasty league, and I've got Bellinger on a taxi squad, so that's one where I'll activate Bellinger tonight if Waller's out, and I'll just put him in the lineup instead. I know another league where um, have I already done this? I think there's one league. It's the Scott Fish Bowl, so maybe this is a league where a lot of people know about, um, and a lot of people play in. Yeah, I've got Waller in right now, and I picked up CJ Uzoma. And my thinking was, I mean, I could have gone for Bellinger, could have gone for some other guys, but the truth is, with CJ Uzoma, based on last year, it looks like Tyler Conklin. Well, last year he was. Tyler Conklin was the starting tight end for the Jets, and he was playing ahead of Uzoma. But that's Mike White, Zach Wilson, Joe Flacco offense. In an Aaron Rodgers offense, does he prefer Uzoma to Conklin? I don't know, but I think I at least want to. In week one, I'll take that shot, that off chance that someone is available for him, and it may not be what was established last year. Because if you look at Ty Conklin and CJ Uzoma's careers, like last year, Conklin outproduced Uzoma by a ton, but every previous year, there were seasons where Uzoma would put up better seasons than Conklin. So at this point in their careers, I don't think there's enough evidence to say that Conklin is clearly better than Uzoma. So secretly, and it's funny, anyone who listens to the Full Press Fantasy Pod this week, my co-host Brad and I went through our most rostered players. Since that episode came out, I've gone and picked up Uzoma in a couple of leagues where he is now actually my most rostered tight end, even ahead of George Kittle. So this is and Scott Fishbowl was an example of a league where I went and I picked him up. Again, it looks like the reports are Darren Waller is going to play, but if Waller doesn't play, I've got a guy playing Monday night to fall back on. And really, the only reason I didn't take Dawson Knox is because he was already drafted. But ideally, I think in shallow enough leagues, redraft leagues probably, Dawson Knox is the guy I want because we don't know that Kincaid will play ahead of him every single game all year. I think by the end of the year, too, that's where Kincaid will maybe shine more. But early on, there's a chance that Knox is the guy catching those touchdowns week one. So if you need just a 1 week replacement for Darren Waller, and it's got to be someone who plays either Sunday night or Monday night, really of those next options, of those four teams, you've got Daniel Bellinger on the Giants, Jake Ferguson on the Cowboys, who looks to be the lead tight end, either Conklin or Uzoma on the Jets, or Dawson Knox, because I assume Kincaid will have been drafted. Really, of those five options on those four teams, I think I want Dawson Knox the most. Give me that just if for a 1 week chance. If I'm gonna have to make that decision for who's gonna be my backup all year, I think I'd rather it be Jake Ferguson because it looks like he's gonna be the Cowboys starting tight end, get a ton of targets week to week. But if for just a 1 week sample size, I think I want to go with Dawson Knox there. Yeah, so just some potential replacements for those late questionable players. And it looks like right now, I mean, I don't know if there's anyone questionable from Monday night, but of the latest players, it looks like it's Darren Waller. But again, he might also play so that it leaves this as a moot point. But just to say, those are kind of how I'm thinking about it. Those are the decisions I'm going to be making, the players I'm looking to target if I need to, if I need to, as a potential replacement for any of these questionable players. So I guess I could recap what I've talked about. In my most important league, my favorite league, I've got the decision to play Darnell Mooney, Josh Palmer, and Nico Collins. And with Marquise Brown active, I only have to start one of those guys. If Brown was out, I would have had to make it two, and then I think it would have been easy to just put in Mooney for the volume and Palmer for the matchup. But now I really am having to decide. I think I'm going to leave Collins on the bench. Just the idea of the rookie quarterback, the second fewest implied point total. The odds makers are kind of saying they don't expect a great game from the Texans. I think I'll just leave Collins on the bench. Darnell Mooney or Josh Palmer. I think I'm leaning Mooney. It gives me the stack with Fields already. I also like what Mooney has done as a number 2 receiver and not the main focus of a defense when he has played the Packers in the past. Last year was awful, but he was the number 1 receiver on the team, so the Packers could just focus in on him and let's not let Mooney beat us. That was kind of the thing. DJ Moore there now. The Packers won't have that luxury of just blanket covering Mooney and no one else can catch anything. So I think I'm going to go with Mooney. I like his options. I guess the one thing is I'll play uh, Evan Hull, Deion Jackson where I've got them. Any leagues where I was considering playing them, those are going to be the guys I go with now that Zach Moss has been ruled out. It really is just those two. Not a great matchup against the Jaguars, but it's not an awful one either. So yeah, I've got enough Evan Hull and Deion Jackson shares. Got to get them in the lineup somewhere. I love playing Zay Flowers. He's almost to the point where he's a locked-in starter for me, and that is maybe making some assumptions based on how Rashad Bateman hasn't really earned targets yet in the games he has played. He's also been hurt a lot through his career, but he hasn't really done much. And I think if you're telling me at this like what we've seen Rashad Bateman produce at, and that's below the level what we would expect for a first-round receiver like Bateman or Zay Flowers. So if I had to make a realistic guess on do I think Flowers can be better than what Bateman has been these last years, I think it's easily yes. Now, does Bateman get better as well? I would also think that's a possibility, but to this point, I think there is a chance with Andrews out that Zay Flowers might lead this Ravens team in targets. I think the only other guy, if Beckham really is back to being Odell Beckham, I think it's him. But if Beckham is not, like he's healthy and he's playing, because even he was questionable earlier in the week, so it doesn't seem like he's 100% either. I had to guess right now. I'm looking at what Marquise Brown did in his first game with the Ravens, thinking that they could that Zay Flowers can maybe not replicate that, but come close to that. So I like Zay Flowers a lot. I like Tyler Boyd as well. I like him more than Jacoby Myers. I mentioned that the idea of I'm not convinced that he is the clear number 2 target on the Raiders this year. Maybe he is, but I have to see it before I buy in. So I'll play Tyler Boyd ahead of Myers. I'll play Elijah Moore ahead of Juju in the one league where I have both those players. And even though Juju is higher than Moore in my rankings, and that might have more to do with this is the only league where I have Elijah Moore in. And I want to just get him in the lineup. So if he does well, I don't feel like I missed out. And lastly, a late game questionable of Jerry Jeudy, I suppose. That's another one where, yeah, if you've got Jerry Jeudy and you're relying on him, maybe look to see if Jaden Reed is available. Like you don't have to necessarily take from that same Broncos game either. That could be an option. And if you're playing Jeudy as a flex spot, is it like take another tight end as well? I don't know, but all to say, I guess Jeudy is one of those guys where a later game questionable. I like Jaden Reed. I think if he's available as an option there for sure, because I think regardless of what happens, Jaden Reed is going to get targets today. Now that Christian Watson's out, and there's a potential Romeo Dubs is out as well. And with that, I really like playing Cortland Sutton. If Judy's out, even if Judy's in, I think Sutton might still be playable, just because. I think just because really the Raiders defense like that's such an appealing matchup that I think I'd rather I'd bank on just the Broncos offense playing well. We saw them last year not do so well, but it's the Raiders defense. So, but obviously if Judy's out, I think Cortland Sutton's definitely locked in lineups. If Judy plays, I might consider a Brandon Cooks because I like that quarterback better, but because I definitely don't like the matchup better. I think the Giants defense is much better than the Raiders. So I might still go with Cortland Sutton in that, regardless of if Judy plays or not. Because if he does play, it looks like he won't be 100%. So there's a chance that Sutton is still the alpha, getting the most targets anyway. But yes, this was week 1. This is kind of what to expect on a weekly basis from me on this the full press coverage live channel, YouTube channel. Come interact if you want to ask your own start sit questions. I've pondered my decisions that I've made, and hopefully the people listening, that gives them ideas of how to analyze their own decisions, even if it's not the same players applicable, but what things to look at. I think I've done a good enough job on that. Of course, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at Senra Says. And you can DM me about any type of fantasy questions. I love talking fantasy football, so gladly will interact with anyone who wants to interact with me. And also the Full Press Fantasy Pod. We record weekly. My co-host Brad Harvin and I. You can follow that account on Twitter at FPC_fantasypod. We'll be tweeting out all our episodes every week. I believe this upcoming week I will do 2 episodes. One that I'll record and probably publish Monday night talking about tight end targets and targets for the waiver wire, but literally which tight ends earned targets week one, and to kind of to overreact to that. I'm going to say to if you have a tight end on your team and they did not get targets week one, drop them for the players that did. And I'll go kind of through the list. And after week one, what do we have for that target information? What are some add decisions that might have to be made at tight end? So we'll focus on that on an early episode this week. Usually we'll record Wednesday nights and usually publish Wednesday nights as well. So yeah, the Full Press Fantasy Pod goes on weekly. Full Press Packers Pod as well. We'll do 2 episodes a week all throughout the season. Did our game preview for the Bears with Carlos Nazario from Full Press Coverage Bears. After the game tonight, I will do my recap. I'm not sure if my co-host Jesse Hall will be there or not, but I'll try and do those recap games literally like as the game's ending. And this one I'll have basically right between that game ends and Sunday Night Football to record, put it out there. So honestly, later tonight at FPC_Packers, you should see an episode that either celebrates the Packers win against the Bears or talks about how the Jordan Love era did not start out well. But I guess we'll find out later today. Yeah, and for myself personally, not related to Full Press Coverage, I do a Monday night live stream with the Going for Two Live network. So for anyone looking before Monday night's game, if they want to check that out on the Going for Two Live YouTube channel, feel free to also join there. I'll tweet things out at Senra Says on Twitter once once that becomes available as well. So definitely check out everything there. Like I mentioned, feel free to ask any fantasy questions you want. I love interacting, love talking with people. I love fantasy football, love real football. Glad that it's back. And here we are, week 1 of the NFL season. So thank you all for watching. My name is Kyle Senra. Hope you have a great football day. Bye for now, and we'll see you next week.